Hello, this is Charlie, and this is the Kratom Sobriety Podcast, episode 103. And I'm here with Jacob.
Hey, Charlie, it's been a while.
Yeah, and we missed the 100th episode milestone. That would have been a good one to celebrate with you. It's kind of like when an engine goes over 100,000 miles, you want to be there to celebrate it.
Yeah, maybe we'll just turn the odometer back a little bit and pretend it happened.
We're interviewing today
Aminah, who is the partner of Mike, who Libby interviewed last week. So Libby also sat down with Aminah, and we'll hear all about her story and how that relates in what Mike was talking about.
My understanding is a lot of times in relationships, people spiral out of control, relapse together, but their story is a positive one of folks coming together. They were both addicted. They started the relationship, but they emerged in recovery and quitting from Kratom specifically and are continuing to do.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool story for sure.
And today's subject matter for the intro is related to an announcement that we have. So I'll start with the announcement. So first, from this episode going forward, we're going to have a streamlined format where the Kratom in the headlines and resource of the week will be put on a temporary hold, may end up being permanent. And we're just going to run with the main thing, which is the interview. That seems like what is the primary attraction to the podcast. And then we'll still retain the opening segments. Often will be Libby and Jacob doing those for the immediate future. And the idea is it'll be more streamlined. There'll be less work for our team, and we'll see how the listening stats go as well.
Yeah, and if you guys have feedback or really like those segments, want to bring them back, you know how to get in touch with us on social media or how to email us. Just a little behind the scenes stuff for the listeners. Sometimes, particularly with the resource of the week, it was getting hard to continue to find new subject matter. There's only so many different categories of resources out there that one can tap into. And then with the headlines, there's some good headlines out there about various things under Kratom, but a lot of them tend to focus on what's going on in the legal realm or in the more depressing realm, which is fine. Sometimes it's good to just take a step back from...
Yeah, the headlines, we started to cross the line a little bit and dabble into the politics and some of the more controversial issues. But if there's anything that's really important, either in the news or a resource, we'll make sure to put it in the intro and or the show notes. And that relates to what we're going to talk about here in the open is staying connected to a substance as part of your recovery versus putting it in the rear view window and shutting the door to it in your life. And that balance. One of the points of getting off Kratom or quitting any drug or alcohol is you want to spend less time thinking about it, less part of your life focused on it, and put it in the past. But because our collective history is that when you totally slam the door on it, there's a chance for you to trip up and get back into a relapse. Any initial thoughts with that?
Yeah, I think it is a balance. And I think with Kratom, it's even harder because it is so controversial. And I would say it's a newer substance of concern or abuse. A lot of people, rightfully so, feel like they are victims of the Kratom industry through deceptive marketing and various other things. But I think it can lead to, so it can be good in that aspect because it keeps you connected and it allows you to remember like all the bad things that happen. At the same time, it also can be tiring and like to the point where I know for myself, when I first quit the first like 6 months or even year, I was probably more connected to what's going on in the legal aspect of it and how's the growth in the industry and all that stuff. And I really haven't paid attention to any of that in the last couple months. Like I couldn't tell you what the AKA is up to or what the people that are opposing them are up to. Like I'm just glad to not be involved in any of that. That's not really my focus. And I think, it's interesting when I compare Kratom to alcohol. I listen to one alcohol-focused podcast. I don't listen to it every week. I just like when I feel like I could use it or when I see an interesting topic pop up in my feed. I do go to a meeting where, Smart Recovery, where we do talk about both. So I do keep some of that, but it's not nearly as front and center. I guess other than the fact that people are drinking everywhere and it's in your face all the time, it's way different than the amount of kind of focus I still have with Kratom in my life. And I think at some point it ebbs and flows of about how much you want to stay connected to it.
I can compare my involvement with alcohol now, and I'm 100%. I don't go to any meetings anymore, and I have no cravings whatsoever. And alcohol was definitely a lifelong problem. It's been almost 5 years that I haven't drank. And so should I still call myself an alcoholic? Now my challenge is relapsing on Kratom, because when I have urges, that's the choice. And the critics out there will say, well, you should give Kratom the credit for curing
Sure.
your alcoholism. But seriously, with Kratom, I'm struggling with how much, because of the podcast, how much it's a part of my life. And
yeah,
I do think continuing this is a good service, and I got so much out of it, especially at the beginning. The podcast was like my quitting method. If I don't know how I would have had to try something else. I would have maybe had to go on a treatment or done Suboxone. I used this podcast as the fundamental way of how I quit. But now, going 2 years on, I've lost some interest. I don't know if some disinterest has come through to listeners. If you can tell, it's like whenever you have a life change, how much are you going to integrate the past into what you're doing now versus when you're going into the future? I do think it's important to stay involved somehow. Relapse prevention is really important. And there's different ways to do that. I think service to others is a one way, to pass it on. Working with newcomers, it does have this instantaneous reminder of why you don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. I do still enjoy a good conversation with a fellow addict to hear how they ended up where they ended up and how they got out of it, because it reminds me of why I don't want to go back there.
Yeah.
And I think that for me has been maybe why I haven't maybe had the same feelings that you had, but I also haven't been doing it as long, and you were much more heavier involved for a lot longer period than I was. But I do think as time goes on, it's one of those things where, you and I may get to a point where the newer people on our team or another group of folks decide that they want to step up and help and hand it over. And that's just the way life goes. I think it's like anything else. You have periods where you are very valuable focusing on one thing. And then as time goes on, there's some point we're going to probably have said the same thing so many times that maybe people won't want to hear from us anymore. And it'd be good to hear from others that have newer experiences.
And with Kratom, I do feel a bigger sense of obligation to keep this going. With AA, my continuing involvement does have little effect on the legacy of whether or not there's the network of resources to continue helping reach new alcoholics. In the Kratom world, so sparse, but I'm glad to see how much it's expanded since we started, but I still think there's a lack of self-help tools and resources and outlets.
I agree, yeah. It's not like alcohol or cocaine or booze, or alcohol and booze are the same thing, or like opiates or fentanyl or something like that, where there's a multitude of podcasts, a multitude of YouTube channels and all this other stuff. There's really just the Kratom meetings, which have exploded now, and there's one every day, and this podcast and a few other things, but that's it. And a couple Facebook groups and chats and whatnot. And I think with the amount of growth that those forums that exist are seeing, there's probably definitely room out there for others to do more podcasts or YouTube channels or whatever makes sense.
Yeah. So I guess that I don't have a major synthesized point of view. Just your relationship with your previous substance, your involvement in recovery activities and that subject matter may ebb and flow, and it's okay to adjust it over time.
So that's probably a good place to leave it.
All right, let's head to that interview that Libby has.
All right.
Hi, everyone. This is the Kratom Sobriety Podcast. My name is Libby. We are on episode 103 today. I'm here with Aminah, and she's going to go ahead and introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Aminah. I am a barber. I'm 36. I have been really excited with this interview, so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you. We interviewed your partner before, and so it's going to be really interesting to get like a dual perspective on having a relationship in addiction with Kratom.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us a little bit about like how you first came across Kratom or how it came into your life?
The first time I ever came across Kratom, I was with a friend and he put it in yogurt and I was like, what the F are you? Sorry, can I cuss or no?
Yeah, you can guess.
So I'm like, what the fuck are you? What is that? And he was like, oh, it's Kratom. And he used it every once in a while, but he was like, you want to try some? And I was like, sure. But I took a bite and it was just disgusting. So it wasn't enough to make me feel anything. But then eventually I ended up becoming reintroduced to it through social media and advertising about recovery from like my workouts and how it's like really an amazing remedy. And anyway, that's the second way around that I became introduced to it. And then that's when it became a habit.
It's so interesting that you say that because only since I've quit have I been getting these ads, but I've been getting these ads for like all kinds of new, I'll call them elixirs. And they oftentimes don't even tell you that there's kratom in them. So they'll be targeting me and then I will go digging and find out. And it won't even say kratom. It'll say metragenine or whatever. You have to really know what you're looking for. And it's insane to me. Did you know what you were getting when you got it?
No, I never thought it was related to being an opiate until I was at a doctor's appointment and I try my best. Now I'm very honest, but there was a time I was kind of secretive about my habits, when I was talking to my doctor. But I take an antidepressant called Wellbutrin. I just wanted to be sure that I'm not mixing things that are dangerous. And when I mentioned it to her, she was like, oh my gosh, that's like an opiate. And I got kind of defensive and was like, really, is it? I mean, I feel like it's been helping me. And I learned from her to be careful. She didn't say stop right away. She said, I don't think it's a good idea for you to be mixing those things. And I would advise you to be careful. That's what happened. It started off good, but it spiraled into years of ups and downs. And I feel like at first, it made me think I was going to like switch off of antidepressants to Kratom. And let me tell you, when I tried that, that was not good. That was not good. And that was me trying to be my own doctor, like, oh, it's holistic, it's an herbal remedy, it's natural. It was a dangerous call on my part for my mental health because it made me feel honestly more depressed when I tried that. It did. I was just an emotional wreck. I feel like I was like so emotional and easy to trigger. Anything would make me cry,
You were basically targeted by ads. Were they for like powder or were they for like extracts? Yeah. Okay.
There was a website, and I won't say names, but yeah, it was a website that came up in my email. It was so weird. I'm like, what the heck? Like an ad just like I don't know. Maybe because of me being a business owner, I feel like I'm more vulnerable to my email getting pop-ups. I do get random ads, and one of them was for Kratom. So I looked into it, and I was very eager to learn about the recovery strain. When I ended up purchasing it and giving it a try, I feel like the one thing that was really dangerous, in my opinion, one of the many things, but this is the main thing, is they just give you a bag with nothing but like, here you go, like it doesn't tell you how much to take. It doesn't tell you how often to take it. Okay, well, let me just take a spoonful of this. And it can be the difference between being sick AF. It was a mess. I'll just say that.
Yeah. So you spiraled out pretty quickly, like started using a lot pretty fast.
Yeah, until I met a person that I became friends with through work, and we just so happened to talk about Kratom. And honestly, it's not very often that I run into anyone, depends on how old they are, but Kratom is not as known, honestly. Like, it is known, but it's not popular amongst the people that I talk to. So we're like, oh, you know about Kratom? Oh, wow. So I ended up finding a way to get Kratom from him, and he was the one that educated me on how to be careful using it and told me, like, you want to measure it and you want to be careful not to, take too much. But honestly, I did take his advice, but not 100%. I didn't take his advice 100%. I was like, okay, sure, but I still was, ultimately trying to chase a certain feeling that Kratom gave me, the addictive feeling of that. Yeah. I'm not trying to glorify it, but at first you think you feel amazing and everything's going great until that feeling doesn't happen again. At this point, you're just trying to like go to work and function and not be like sick, basically. And I should mention that I am an ex heroin addict. So I think that because of that, it made Kratom more attractive for me because it was like, well, it's not as bad as heroin. That was definitely a factor for me. I wasn't using heroin. Like, I'd been clean for a while before I started using Kratom. So it wasn't like I was using heroin then straight to Kratom. There was a gap in between. 3 years.
Yeah, I'm also an ex-heroin addict and also had a gap in between. Okay, so I would love to know a little bit about like how Kratom functioned in your relationship, just because that's the context in which I know you.
I would say that at first, being that Michael and I both struggled with addiction, I will say I entered the relationship with a decent amount of clean time off of heroin. I still dibble dabbled with alcohol and cannabis. I would say that at first it was fine, meaning like we functioned and, but I will say, I mean, when I say fine, I mean like we were definitely clinging to the Kratom habit that controlled every aspect of what we did. That was the only thing that really was annoying. I should mention we made it official during 2020. So during 2020 and 2021, we didn't really put any thought into it about quitting Kratom because we were locked in. We can't travel really, right? Once we started getting more eager into traveling and going to enjoy ourselves, that's when we were like, this is lame, That's one of the things that inspired us to, want to stop Kratom, is us being able to enjoy our lives, travel, not have to worry about Kratom being the center of our world.
At what point was it like, this is a problem that we don't want to continue to have?
So Michael actually started to get sick feelings from Kratom before me. I was on a taper, I want to say like 6 months. I was on a taper and I was actually pretty successful, but I kind of parked my taper at one amount of grams, which at one point I was taking like 50 grams a day. And then I got it down to 10, between 10 and like 15. I would like toy around with it depending on, how my day felt. But there was a time that Michael quit and he actually did well quitting and he stayed off of it for 30 days, but having a partner that's still using it, I don't think that helped. And I felt guilty for that, honestly. I did. And I was like always trying to sneak my dose so he didn't have to see me, taking it. But ultimately what happened is one morning I woke up and I want to say it was either the end of February or the beginning of March. And I woke up in tears and I told Michael straight up, like, it felt like I'm waking up from the grave. Like literally I was on Kratom, I was on cannabis, and I was taking melatonin. Like, I don't know what the heck I was thinking. That's when I decided it was time. And then Michael too, he actually had approached me one afternoon, really feeling super sick from Kratom in a way that was very concerning. Like, he was like, my head hurts. I feel like my heart is racing. And I'm like, my brain, he had an insane painful headache and his heart was racing. And I was like, this is a no-brainer. Pick our health and our lives together over Kratom. What mattered most to me is seeing him and myself be healthy. Yeah, it'd been a lingering thought in my head to quit Kratom, but I always kept a certain amount of Kratom with me, saying, well, after I finish this batch, And so it was like a continuing battle of lies that I was telling myself, and it was time for me just to do it. And so Officially, I started really taking my taper seriously in March of this year. And I told myself April 1st, that'll be my first day, no Kratom, like done. Like that's it. And Michael, he quit on the 10th. Yeah. I know that we both had our own journeys of how we quit. We didn't do it the same way. I tapered and he did cold turkey, but I know he did consult a doctor and he temporarily took Suboxone for the time of the worst part of the withdrawals. And then he, you know, after I want to say he may have done it for like 3 or 4 days, taking Suboxone, but then after that he was off everything. But I flushed like a lot of Kratom down the toilet actually. I was done. I was like, that's it. So yeah.
Yeah, I have to commend you. I've been in relationships where both of us were addicted and one thing had to end, the relationship, the drug addiction, or both. It wasn't like I could have both. So I really commend you guys for making your relationship a priority. And that's really amazing. So what was the withdrawal like? So you tapered down to like 10 grams and then you jumped off. How was that?
So my worst withdrawal symptoms occurred during the taper. And it's tough. It's tough because there's days where you're like, you know what? Fuck this. Like, I can't take it anymore. But then the way I looked at it is, okay, so you're going to start over again. But I actually took pictures. I did a photo shoot. I was having a complete meltdown. Felt like the lowest of the low, like listening to Linkin Park, feeling like crap. And I came upstairs to the bathroom, so I'm just in my own bubble, and I didn't want, and Michael knew what I was going through, and I let him know, like, hey, my moods are gonna be weird, so just give me my space. Don't worry, I'm fine. I'll get through it. But during the taper, I like took pictures of what I looked like during the withdrawals, just to kind of like remind myself of what I went through from taking Kratom. I would say so on the weekends or on the days I wasn't working, I would challenge myself to not take Kratom until the very end of the day. So that way at least I can get some sleep. Yeah, I would go like emotionally, mentally. I think that's the worst part, honestly, is the emotional part. Physically, I was definitely uncomfortable and antsy. The dark thoughts that go through your head from the withdrawals, you have to remind yourself that it's temporary and that you'll get through it. Initially, I took a week off from work. Honestly, I could have gotten away with only 2 or 3 days. I think the taper was very helpful for my withdrawals to be way less painful. But I know that tapering's really hard. I do. Like Michael was like, it was hard for him to do that. By the end of my journey with tapering, my last dose was 4 grams a day, and I would divvy it up 4 times a day. And I would do 1 gram in the morning, 1 gram in the afternoon, one in the early evening, and one right before I went to bed. But sometimes I would actually keep the 2 grams completely for before I was going to bed. But I actually did get some insomnia. That was a given, honestly. But it's okay. I actually ended up utilizing that time where I couldn't sleep, doing things to get my mind off of the withdrawals, whether it's like journaling or vlogging about how you feel or stretching or listening to music that helps you relax or, just finding ways or meetings, no jokes. I know meetings and hearing like people that can relate with what you're going through. I would say that was a big one too. Getting on meetings and just listening if you don't feel like sharing or share, but yeah.
Were you in the Kratom meetings?
Yeah. I will be honest, I'm not super as proactive as Michael is. I'm a firm believer in meetings. I think they're amazing. But I think it's also important to do what works for you. I definitely feel like I have found other outlets that are also meetings, but not always meetings.
That's kind of what the whole podcast is about. It's like, giving examples for people to do it differently. And you two are a great example. In the same time frame where the tapering worked for you and the cold turkey worked better for him, I tried tapering too, and I did it very slowly over like 6 months, and it worked, but I could never really get really low to the point where like there was no, where I didn't get any high. And then eventually like I just threw the taper out the window, and it was like that whole 6 months was pointless almost. So yeah, I mean, different things work for different people.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I remember what it felt like going through heroin withdrawals, and I was terrified. And honestly, I would say be careful the research you do, because I think that sometimes, depending on the research, it can make, like, I almost psyched myself out of wanting to quit because of like people being like, oh, I mean, this is a thing. It's not going to feel incredible getting off a substance. There's side effects, but it's unique to every individual what you're going to feel. So it's hard to say until like finally go through with it. But there's not an easy way of changing habits. It's just kind of rearranging the way we think and how we view the change as shedding away the negative toxins, because that's how I was looking at it. This feeling is awful right now, and it's painful emotionally, physically, mentally, everything. But it's temporary. It is. Your body is recalibrating itself to learn how to be off of a substance that I was using for dang near 8 years. So, it's not going to be easy. The body's like taking its time rebuilding those blocks that on its own, trying to figure out like, what the heck are you doing to me? Oh my gosh, I definitely did a deep amount of research before quitting. I didn't just like go, yay, all right, I'm going to just do this, So I did tons of research to like learn about supplements and, ways to make it less unpleasant. Having a plan, because if you don't have a plan, it's almost right there. It's going to be hard to follow through. And I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, the habits are so ingrained. If you like have no plan, it's going to be so easy to just fall back into habit. How would you compare it to heroin if you were to have to compare it?
So I think that it's more similar to, in my opinion, it's more similar to like taking a Vicodin or something like that. If I take enough of Kratom, enough of it, it really can. And what I mean by that, it didn't feel good. Sometimes like I'd feel nauseous. I'd be sweating. You know what I mean? Like I'd have the spins, and that's the one thing too that frustrated me when I was taking Kratom is like sometimes it would be good, but when it was bad, it was awful. And there's no getting out of it. You just got to ride that wave and like hope to God that like you get through it. And it's very, I definitely isolated for a little while there too. When I was using Kratom, I honestly felt awkward around family trying to fix up my Kratom, or around friends. Like some people didn't even know. They're like, what's that? So I had like really awkward feelings being around people. I had to plan everything around my next dose. Yeah. So if I compare it to heroin, I would say heroin is definitely a lot more intense.
Would you compare the withdrawal in a similar way? Would you say that heroin was a worse withdrawal for you?
I have to say, because I was for a little while there, and trigger warning, that's okay for me to share, but I dibble-dabbled a little bit with injecting. It started off, not injecting, and then it went to injecting. And so anything I think that hits straight to your system like that, it's so dangerous. It's so dangerous. That's why I think it was more intense and difficult, because it was like straight into your system.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, like everyone's different. I did not go that route of administration with heroin, but I did use extracts, and I personally thought that the physical impact and the withdrawal and the everything else was far more substantial than heroin withdrawal.
Well, and heroin, I mean, okay, so on Kratom, I definitely was able to hold myself together a lot better. But again, I'm not saying that I would ever go back to Kratom. No, I'm just saying when I was using it, that it was easier to function.
Yeah, for sure.
But I wasn't functioning at my best.
Right.
By any means. And my work, like now, and when I say work, I mean like my haircuts speak volumes on that. I swear. I'm like, wow, like I was in such a brain fog all these years, and now it's like I'm awake.
Yeah, I started to hate my job, and now I'm like kind of coming back around to it and really enjoying my work again. But I was ready to quit. I'm still ready to quit, but but I was like really dreading work in a way that was not characteristic of me, because I do love what I do. So yeah, it's crazy how it takes a toll on everything that we love.
No, it was my priority. I mean, Kratom was.
Yeah.
And embarrassingly, I'd have a client that I was waiting for their haircut for me. And, I'm like, just hold on, I'll be right back. And, I would have to go get my dose first. And mind you, I'm not on time. I'm like running a little late. It's not like they showed up early, like they've been waiting on me. And so to me, that's what made me realize one of the many things that Kratom is not serving me. I just felt like Kratom was just taking a hold of my life in a way that I didn't have control anymore. It really was the case. Like, was I paying my bills? Yeah, I was paying my bills. I was handling like things that needed to be done, but I wasn't at my best that I could have been. I mean, I don't know if Michael shared with you, but we did the math on how much we spent on it, and I'm embarrassed to even admit it was like almost 10 grand in like 2.5 years. I mean, seriously, I don't know. I mean, maybe to some people that's not that much, but I don't care. 10 grand is 10 grand.
It's a big chunk of money, yeah.
So I was like, oh my gosh. But anyway, so I'm grateful that I celebrated 7 months on Halloween actually.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
amazing. What would you say has been the most supportive of you post the withdrawal, like all the things, like how have you supported your recovery?
You know what? I have to say, having an amazing partner, Michael's been a very, very amazing support and encouragement. I would say that even though I'm not super active on Kratom meetings, I'm still in touch with people from the group, and I get to kind of remind myself of where I was and how far I've come. And just listening to other people reminds me that it's still happening and that I am really grateful that they found Kratom meetings. But I won't lie, like, yeah, I'm not super active in Kratom meetings. But Michael mentioned to me that he noticed that once I put my mind to being done with something, I just do it. I think that's really hard to do. It really is. But when I'm fed up with something, I tend to do my best to figure out how to get rid of that problem. I do work quite a bit. I do love my job. So my job's a pretty social job. So I feel like it gets me out of my head, if that makes sense. So I think that finding ways to get out of my head, and I do like to work out. I'm pretty active. I would say working out has been a big antidepressant for me. I still take my antidepressants, but it helps to have some kind of activity. Ultimately, I don't really crave Kratom anymore. I do the one day at a time because I have been in rehab and I know the 12 steps. So I should mention that too. I already have that in my system built in. So I didn't like heal myself or something. No, I've been through treatment programs that have given me the tools and the methods to be able to be how I am today. It definitely helps having that instilled in me, having people around you that are supportive and on the same page. But I'll be honest, actually the friend that used to give me Kratom, I don't see him all the time, but I still see him every once in a while. He still has to take it, or not has to, but he still takes, Kratom, and I'm there for him as much as I can be. And, he'll vent to me about it, but he's had a hard time stopping. So, I have complete compassion. Like, I would never completely cut someone out if they're using Kratom. I am totally, wanting to show them that I'm here for them. And if they want to talk or, need support, I'm here because I know how it is. So I think that's also another thing that's a tool for me. I think I kind of get a little, I don't know if the word's gratification, but I really feel grateful that I am able to be like the big sister to some people, if that makes sense, as much as I can.
Yeah, being of service is really helpful. It helps us get out of our own heads, I feel like. Well, maybe you could show him the podcast. It might be helpful for him.
For sure. Absolutely. Because he's tried to get off Kratom, but he's not ready, I don't think. I don't know. It's just tough for him. I've been through that where I wasn't ready. This time that I quit finally was my third time. So it wasn't like on the first go that I just was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. It took a couple of times until it finally was time. But I'll definitely let him know.
Yeah, I had to do a lot of research before I was really ready to commit too, especially after attempting to quit. Sometimes I think that the podcast can be a really good resource for just like research, because you get so many accounts of what's worked.
Yeah, I definitely listened to a couple of your interviews. I think it's really amazing hearing all the different stories. It's not a cookie cutter journey. We're all our own individual, but ultimately we come together and relate and know one thing is that Kratom has not been serving us. I can't say that for everybody, but I can say it for me. Kratom has not been serving me or hasn't served me. In the beginning, it feels that way. That's what I've learned about addiction in general. It was easier to stay on Kratom because, again, like if someone, drinks, like that's your brain's like drunk, right? If someone's, on hardcore substances how do I say this? It was just easy to function on Kratom until it wasn't. That's all I'm going to say. Because I'm not going to say that it was easy to function on for the long term because it wasn't. And it really messes with everything in your body. It even messes with intimacy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean.
Yeah. To me, that was kind of a sad thing. Michael and I were not like super young, but we're still young enough to like should be enjoying that part of our lives and our relationship. And it was just taking away every joy that comes along with being in a relationship,
Yeah, totally. Well, I think that's a really good place to stop. Was there anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to go into, or anything else that you wanted to say? Any advice that you'd have to someone that might be quitting Kratom?
Yeah, I would say have a plan and know that it's not a cookie cutter method of change. It's gonna be your own individual method, just like I tapered, right? Not many people can taper. Michael did cold turkey. He did end up utilizing Suboxone, which I'm totally thinking if that's what needs to be done, then do it. And I would say that know that you're not alone and don't be hard on yourself and don't judge yourself and don't think negatively of yourself if it takes you more than once, twice, three times. It doesn't make you any less of a person. Or I personally don't ever want to make it seem like I feel like I'm better than anyone who's using Kratom because, I know how that feels to feel like you're being judged, and so, but yeah, just take it one day at a time and have a plan and love yourself because if you don't love yourself, then how can you love anyone else,
For sure. Amen. Well, Aminah, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your night.
Thank you, Libby. It was a pleasure talking to you too.